listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma, and I'm your host, Trish Glose. Fire up your grills, Meathead Goldwyn on the podcast today. He's the author of Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, founder of website AmazingRibs.com, a member of the Barbecue Hall of Fame. This man knows his stuff. We had a super fun conversation, but I have to tell you, I learned so much from him. He takes us back where this love of barbecue came from, says it really started with Dad, although it was a barbecue joint in college in Florida that really everything clicked for him. We talk about the science of barbecuing and grilling, the difference there. He breaks down some mistakes that most of us make in front of a grill or a smoker. And then we start talking turkey. And I have to tell you, I learned so much about how to cook turkey this year for Thanksgiving. It's coming up. It'll be here before you know it. So grab some paper, maybe a pen, and get ready to take some notes. Here's Meathead Goldwyn. Hello, barbecue whisperer.
Am I supposed to whisper as we speak?
Please don't. No audio issues for this podcast, please, sir. Meathead Goldwyn, thank you so much for being here with me today.
You can just call me Meathead.
Okay. Well, I have some questions about Meathead, but first of all, I want to introduce you properly, sir. Barbecue Whisperer. You're also the author of Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, on the New York Times bestseller list, right? Incredible.
Yeah.
100 best cookbooks of all time, according to Southern Living magazine. There it is right there. Yes. Nice. In doing my research, you are and have been everywhere. I mean, Rachel Ray, Harry Connick Jr. show, it's too many to list. Your cookbook, obviously, but you're a judge. You've been a wine critic, a writer. I mean, I was going to list all this stuff out, and then I said, no, I can't because it's just too much.
I was a full-time wino for 20 years. You know what the difference between a wino and a connoisseur is?
Please tell me.
$10 a bottle.
I'm the wino stage, I think.
No, I was the wine critic for the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune for many years. Published a magazine about wine, and then I switched to solid food about the year 2000. And I'd always been interested in barbecue and cooking, and Dad taught me how to grill. And I started a little website just for the fun of it, and it took off. It's now AmazingRibs.com is now the largest and most popular barbecue and grilling website in the world. We get about 2 million visitors a month, and we have 17,000 members of our Pitmaster Club.
Wow. That's significant. Speaking of Dad, where are you from originally?
Well, I was actually born on the south side of Chicago. Very quickly thereafter, my parents moved to Long Island, 10 years on Long Island. Then we moved to Sarasota, Florida. Dad was working for the USDA as an inspector. So we lived a little while in Maine. And then I went to the University of Florida. Mm-hmm. And
majored in journalism, right?
Yeah. So I learned to write, and actually I learned photography there too. Mm-hmm. I studied under the great Jerry Uhlsman, and then came back to Chicago and got a job in liquor stores, and been here ever since. So been here. Well, actually, we spent 20 years in Ithaca, New York. I got married. My wife went to Cornell to get her PhD, and I followed her.
Nice. So
I've been around.
Well, I read that Dad actually started calling you Meathead.
Yeah. There was a TV show back in the 70s, I think, called Archie Bunker.
Yes.
And Archie was a bigot and a racist, but he was a kind-hearted old fellow. And he had a daughter who married, they were both kind of hippies, and Rob Reiner was the son-in-law, and Archie just called him Meathead because they didn't agree at all politically. And Dad and I didn't agree politically, although he was not a bigot or a racist. And he jokingly dubbed me Meathead. And this was long before the internet. But when the internet first appeared, and I got involved very early in the internet, you had to have a name, an avatar to participate in message boards and stuff. And Meathead was a natural since I was into barbecue.
And Dad called you Meathead just based on like that show. It was something that was kind of out of affection, sounds like.
Oh yeah. Although we did this was during the Vietnam War,
right?
And we had some pretty serious political differences.
Okay, so but Meathead stuck. Real name? Can you divulge?
Just Meathead.
Just Meathead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My wife and my mother have other names for me, but they're not printable.
All right, Meathead. I like it. Because it sounds. I mean, honestly, when Peg Sanfilippo basically introduced us via email and said he would be great for your podcast, and she's like, "Have you heard of Meathead?" And I'm like, it sounds familiar. And then in doing my research and she kept saying Meathead. I'm like, that can't be his name. Like people can't really call him Meathead.
Well, I mean, this is the year 2022. You have to have a brand.
You do.
You have to have an identity.
Yeah.
I was Meathead on the internet, and it became my byline.
Yeah.
And I do not reveal the name I was given at birth. Because it's my brand, and I don't dilute my brand. It's a marketing thing, and that's the name of my book, Meathead.
Right.
I'm working on a new book now called The Meathead Method. All my bylines anywhere are Meathead.
Meathead.
If you dig hard enough on the internet, you can find other names. But
I didn't dig hard enough. Well, I will say this: it does. There is a level of success there, right? I mean, by you committing to not diluting your brand and sticking to this name of Meathead does highlight how successful you've been over the last few decades.
It has other advantages, when I call somebody's business office and I want to speak to the CEO, and I get a clerk or a secretary or a receptionist on the phone, and I say Meathead calling, she always remembers, when I call back, it's, oh yeah, hi Meathead. Yeah. So I get through right away.
Okay. I'm gonna think about my brand and my avatar, what I want that to look like.
Yeah. How about Big Red?
You know what's funny? So my uncle, I'm from South Carolina. My uncle has red hair. He's Big Red. I'm Little Red.
Okay, I like that too.
So.
And I love South Carolina. Great place for barbecue, and of course, famous for its mustard barbecue sauces, which many people don't know about. The word somehow has not gotten out that far.
That's a shame.
And they're marvelous. I mean, they're absolutely my first choice for pulled pork.
We did vinegar-based sauce. My papa and my uncle would barbecue an entire hog. Kind of during the holiday season. He, they did it sort of in the ground initially, just like kind of right below, not like dig a hole, but kind of right below the ground surface. And then ultimately built a grill for this ginormous hog. And it was, as several hour process. Grandma would be in the kitchen making the barbecue sauce. The whole house would smell like vinegar. You'd breathe it in and like pepper spray almost. I mean, I have very
the Carolinas, I mentioned the mustard sauce, which is, I think, one of the most unique, but the Carolinas have two other famous barbecue sauces. Lexington dip being one of them, which is mostly vinegar. And the other one is also the Eastern Carolina, almost all vinegar. So they're very similar, but and people scrunch up their nose when you say vinegar on as a barbecue sauce, but it works marvelously. The acidity is really good at cleansing the palate of fat, and a lot of the barbecue meats are fatty, and so you take a bite of pulled pork, and it fills the mouth with flavors and juices and fats, and this vinegar sauce clears it out. And the next bite is as good as the first.
Yeah, you can keep eating. Just more. Just
Yeah.
eat all of
It's
it.
like drinking a good Sauvignon Blanc. It clears
Exactly.
out the palate, rinses the palate, and you're back to brand new.
Yep. Pulled pork and Sauvignon Blanc. So much in common. Um, was food important growing up in your family?
Yeah. Dad was a food technology major at NYU, and he and Uncle Buddy owned when they graduated, they opened a dog food factory. That didn't work out, and they opened a butcher shop. And that didn't work out all that well. And then Dad went to work for the USDA as an inspector. And his first gig when I was 10 years old was the coast of Maine, inspecting blueberry factories. And I have fabulous, fond, romantic memories of a idyllic summer on the coast of Maine, and lots of blueberry pies and lobster and wonderful, wonderful. And then they transferred him to uh, Florida, where he was inspecting orange juice factories.
Hmm.
But then he found one of the orange juice factories adulterating the juice with water. They shut him down, and of course, he was unemployed now. He became a stockbroker after that.
Oh, wow. Okay. But so it sounds like food has always been, I mean, his work. Food was his work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, as a family, was food like, did anybody in your family cook? Was it dinner, around the table, dinners?
I think we were pretty middle class, ordinary cooks,
Hmm.
mom and dad. Mom had a few specialties. She did a lasagna that was pretty good. Dad was a griller. That's where I got the taste for it. He had something like a Weber kettle. I don't know if it was a Weber kettle. And his specialty was flank steak and maybe beef ribs. They were both inexpensive cuts. And I loved to hang out the smell of grilling beef. And, he'd maybe let me have a sip of beer while I was hanging out with him. That might have stimulated my interest. But that's where it kindled my love of grilling and barbecue. And
Hmm.
it cascaded from there. When I was at the University of Florida, I discovered real barbecue in a sketchy neighborhood of town, and I kept coming back and kept coming back, and these old black guys who were there couldn't figure out what this college kid was doing hanging around, and eventually they took me under their wing and they brought me out back and let me watch the guys tend the fire, and I learned classic old Southern open pit barbecue from a couple of old black guys in Gainesville, Florida, who were doing it, and we became good friends. And I was their pupil. It was fantastic.
I love that. They just sort of took you in as a student. And so it sounds like you went to University of Florida. You were a journalism major. What did you
Mm-hmm.
want to do?
Well, I had an aptitude for writing. Actually, I started out in pre-med, and then I flunked out. Organic chemistry killed me, and
Mm,
since then I've developed a real interest in chemistry, and calculus. Those two just kicked me out.
tell me about
And
it.
when you flunk out during the Vietnam War, you go to war, and I was not interested in that idea. So I got back in as a journalism major, and I thought I'd work for newspapers. And in fact, I did for a while. I was a stringer for the Associated Press in Gainesville. I contributed a number of bylined articles for them. And I had a hobby of photography, which got fairly serious. The university had a number of well-known photographers. Jerry Uhlsman, one of them,
Hmm.
not a household name, but if you Google him, he'll blow you away. His work looks like Photoshop, but this was long before Photoshop. And he was a genius, and he just died this year.
Wow.
And a tremendous influence on me, and writing and photography. They're awfully handy on the internet if you have those skills.
I was gonna say, sounds like it set you up for all of these
Yeah.
things that followed,
Yeah.
especially being on the internet. But
Well,
going
there's
back,
new.
go ahead.
I was going to say that I did all the photography in my last book, and it's above average, not great. But I'm doing the photography for my new book. The last book was subtitled "The Science of
Hmm.
Barbecue and Grilling." This new book the is about culinary art, and I have brought in. I have a master's in art, and I brought in my art background to this, and I've really elevated the photography. And some of them, if I say so, the photography is just gorgeous.
That's amazing. I was just talking about this with a friend. I recently did a story on a local restaurant here that's on the New York Times restaurant list, 50 places in America they're excited about. So I did this big story. I shot all of the video, and my friend said, the camera work is stunning. Did you do that? And I was like, yeah, I did. It's vulnerable, right? Like putting your talents out there
Mm-hmm.
for people to appreciate or judge.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very vulnerable place. Like that. Like I didn't realize you shot all the photography for that first book, but that's a vulnerable place because, as it comes from a place, it comes from your heart, right? Like,
Well, that book, the photography, I'll say, was meant to be expletive. That is to say, explaining what I'm doing,
right.
and demonstrative. It wasn't an effort to artistry. This book, I am making an effort at artistry,
Got it.
and a number of people who've seen the photography have commented on uh, the painterly look to the images. So I'm very pleased, very pleased.
Fantastic.
You'll see.
Congratulations on that. Let's go back to the group of barbecue guys in Gainesville, Florida. Did that click for you at that moment when they sort of took you in under their
Oh yeah.
wing? Were you like,
Oh,
this
I
is
knew I was watching alchemy. I knew I was watching skill, artistry. I knew I was watching something special that not a lot of people knew about. I knew that this was uh, important culinarily to and historically and culturally to American culture.
mm-hmm.
This was all obvious right on the surface. I mean,
Wow.
the first bite of great barbecue, it's ethereal. It takes you. Everyone loves it, and I was enamored instantly. I never took it all that seriously. At the time, I was working in a liquor store, ABC Liquors in Gainesville,
Mm-hmm.
and I was deep into wine, and that was a lot of fun. I was bringing wine back to the fraternity house, and we were tasting wines together, and I was making wine recommendations to my professors, and they were grateful. I don't know if it ever helped my grades, but so I was becoming a wino with a side interest in barbecue.
Right.
And that led to about a 20-year career in and around wine, where I became the wine critic for several newspapers, syndicated wine. Or I even published a magazine about wine for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So, but after a while, I love wine to this day, and I love the wine community. And I spent a lot of time out in your neighborhood, out in Oregon. I knew David Lett, who was the founder of the Oregon wine industry. I knew him well. But wine people profess that it's not snobby, that it's very down to earth and friendly. But in fact, there is a lot of snobbery around it. And in fact, it is esoteric, and the language is highfalutin, and it's a jargon that is meant not only to describe but to separate the experts from the rest of society.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of got to me after a while, and my love of food took over. And in 2000, I sold my wine magazine. I owned International Wine Review magazine, and I sold it, and I embarked on the barbecue career.
It's interesting that you say that because I feel at times that I am in the wine club, that I'm there because
Mm-hmm.
I do know some of the words and the language, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know what grows where for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. But then you start talking to the really smarty pants wine folks who are
Mm-hmm.
incredibly wonderful and nice and brilliant, and then I just feel really intimidated, and I'm just like, ugh,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say anything.
Listen, wine is just absolutely marvelous stuff. It's miraculous, and the way it's grown and the people who really know a lot about it
Mm-hmm.
are remarkable. I mean, I was on the U.S. wine tasting team. I competed in a competition at the World Trade Center
Wow.
against the French national team, and they kicked our arses.
I didn't even know that
But
existed. The U.S. wine team, like the Olympics
yeah,
of wine tasting.
yeah. I don't know if it still does, but this was back in the 90s.
Nice.
And there were four of us on the team, and it was a blind tasting. We had to identify the wines, and
And
yeah,
the
it was
French
fun.
the French kicked your ass.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
they kind of like invented wine, right?
Yeah, practically, yes, yeah.
Okay, so you switched though. And wine was your life, as you just sort of explained, for so long, but you made the switch to food, to the culinary world.
Yeah.
Um, and it sounds like it just welcomed you with open arms. I mean, it everything clicked.
The barbecue world is a little more open, a little more friendly. But I fear I'm noticing some snobbery creeping in there too.
Oh no.
Well, I mean, it starts with the definition of the word barbecue. There are people who want to make a big deal that barbecue is different than grilling, and that if you're cooking hamburgers on the grill, it's not barbecue. And I can successfully defeat that argument. If somebody, I'm not going to get deep into it, but it's a little frustrating. There is that, the whole concept of jargon. It's a form of language where computer people have their own jargon, barbecue people have their own jargon, wine people have their own jargon, and it's useful in that it helps you describe aspects of your specialty. For example, we talk about the bark on barbecue. Well, a lot of people have no idea what the hell we're talking about. We're talking about the crust. Um, Wine people talk about astringents. People have no idea what the hell astringents is. But it serves a valuable function, but it also is a wall, and it also blockades us behind our wall, defining us as experts and you as novices. And that's part of the problem of jargon. I was really well attuned to that. I taught wine at Cornell University during their summer school, and they had they had a summer school for alumni, and alums would come back. They'd sleep in dorms, and they take a whole week of intensive classes, 9 to 5, including lunches. We did field trips and everything, and my class was right next door to Carl Sagan's class. Now, I can see from the expression, you know who Carl Sagan is. I don't know if everybody listening knows who Carl Sagan is, but Carl Sagan was an astrophysicist, but he possessed an extraordinary talent. He could talk about astrophysics in a language that everybody can understand. And he did a program on PBS called Cosmos, which was a multiple part series, and it was fascinating. And the novice, somebody who'd never looked through a telescope, could tune in and learn. And that's because he understood how to communicate to everyone. And that skill of being able to communicate to both the expert and the novice is something that always stuck with me. Jerry Ulsman, my photography instructor, had that skill also. And I have striven towards that goal.
I think some of the best teachers that I've ever had, mentors, have all possessed that ability to communicate, to not make you feel stupid, right? There is no such thing as a dumb question in this environment when you're with someone like that. I do think that's an incredible skill, and that really does separate those. Again, talking about that level of success, it separates people, right? If you can really break something down that's very complex and you can break it down so people get it. I mean, who would you rather go to ask a question?
Yeah, if I'd had a organic chemistry teacher like that, I might be Dr. Goldwyn today.
Dr. Meathead. I mean,
That's
I
right.
think you have some like a PhD in barbecue and grilling at this point.
Oh,
Um,
I probably have that level of knowledge, but I just have a lot of fun with it.
that's well, and you can tell. And again, that separates you, right? That separates you from other people because you can
Well,
communicate and
what
you have
really has
fun.
separated me and my book has hit 250,000 copies in the last quarter. Um, Most cookbooks are lucky to do 10 to 20,000 copies. What separates it is the subtitle, The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling. And it's really a science book. The first half of the book explains what is heat, what is smoke,
Hmm.
what is fire, what is energy, what happens when energy interacts with meat, what's in meat, what is meat, what are vegetables, and the chemistry and the physics. There's a lot of chemistry and physics, which I hope I have done as my mentors did and explain it in a accessible fashion. And I think that's what has separated it. I think a lot of barbecue enthusiasts own the book now because of that, because this is 2022. And when we see a recipe, we don't necessarily just want the author to tell us, do step one and shut up, do step two and shut up, do step three and shut up. We want to know, why do I do step one?
Yeah.
What happens if I skip step two? What if I substitute brown sugar for white sugar? We are a technological society. We want to know why. And that's the kind of thing that I do and that I'm best known for.
Fantastic. Let's talk about barbecuing and grilling a little bit. Are the two of them different?
There are. I'd rather address them as direct energy cooking and indirect energy cooking, because heat is a form of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And we apply this energy to food, meat, vegetables, whatever. And if you apply it directly using infrared, which is the same energy you get when you stand out in the sun, a lot of people think that's ultraviolet. There is ultraviolet in there, but infrared is what makes that the most potent energy that burns the back of your neck, that makes you feel hot. And then when you step into the shade, it's still warm, but now you're warming from indirect energy.
Mm-hmm.
You're not directly in the rays of the infrared. And that same principles apply to grilling and barbecue. A lot of people try to separate them by, well, barbecue is low and slow and grilling is hot and fast. But it's impossible to draw the line. What is hot and fast? Is it 300, 305, 310, 200, 250? Where do you draw the line? So you draw the line as to whether it is directly over charcoal and glowing embers or flame. That's direct infrared energy, like standing in the sun. And the other side of that line is indirect, like you're in the shade. And for most cooking on a grill, I almost always recommend you divide the grill in half and you have the fire and the coals on one side and nothing on the other side. And now you have direct infrared energy on one side and indirect convection airflow on the other side. They're two different levels of energy. They work differently, and you can use them by moving the food back and forth, or by starting in one zone and moving to the other zone, to control temperature and to control the outcome. Because cooking is all about temperature control, and that means energy control. And so that therein lies the real difference. Sounds very complicated, technical, but the idea that one is hot and fast and the other is low and slow, it just doesn't apply.
Okay. And I know just from my teeny tiny bit of experience when it comes to grilling and barbecue, and especially growing up with family who that's what we did a lot. Different meats require different methods. Is that safe to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You need to look at the cut of meat and determine, is it a very tough cut of meat? That is to say, does it have a lot of connective tissue? For example, ribs. They protect your vital organs, your heart, your lungs, your liver, your stomach are all inside your rib cage. And they are connected, these rib bones, with some very tough, resilient muscles that have a lot of connective tissue surrounding them. And that connective tissue makes them very tough. And if you just take a slab of ribs and throw it on a grill directly over the flame or the charcoal, it'll be done in 2 or 3 hours, but it's going to be very tough to chew. The goal now is to break down that connective tissue, to make that connective tissue melt into gelatin. And that connective tissue, collagen, will break down into gelatin at a lower, slower, indirect convection airflow environment. And it can be very tender and juicy if you cook it that way. And you will typically cook a slab of ribs up to 190 to 200 degrees. Well done is 155.
Right.
You are way past well done.
Right.
You are in the stratosphere. You're almost to the point of boiling temperature, which is 212. 203, 205 is a good target. 212 is, so you're almost at the point of boiling. I mean, a medium rare steak, which is it when it's most tender and most juicy, is 130 to 135 degrees. That's a medium rare steak, not 140, and well done is 155. So you've got two different kinds of meat. A medium rare steak, like a ribeye or a filet mignon, has very little connective tissue. It's very tender of its own. So it doesn't need all that long, low, and slow breakdown of connective tissues. It's going to be tender from the get-go.
So, you know, when you were talking about ribs and connective tissue, I immediately went to brisket, which we've smoked some brisket in our lives, and it was incredibly frustrating.
Brisket is the pectoral muscles of the steer, and steers don't have collarbones. So the entire weight of the front end of the animal, which is more than half the weight, it's almost 2/3 the weight, because it's got the head, the shoulders, the chest, the lung capacity, all up on the front, on the weight on the pectoral muscles. There's two muscles in the brisket. And so the connective tissues there are very strong, very tough. And they absolutely require very low temperatures for a long time to break down these connective tissues. But the secret to great brisket, in addition to cooking it low and slow for a long time, the secret to great brisket is to start with a good brisket ingredient. And that's the secret to all great cooking. A lot of chefs will tell you it's not so much your cooking technique as it is your buying technique.
Agreed.
Learn to buy great ingredients and you're off to a good start.
Yes.
You can make bad food from great ingredients, but you can't make great food from bad ingredients. And so when you're shopping for brisket, you must get USDA Choice or USDA Prime or Wagyu. These are the higher grades, and there's more marbling, and it'll be more tender. So if you just go into the store and buy any old brisket, there's a high likelihood you're getting USDA Select, which is a lower grade and is guaranteed to be tough.
Yikes. Yeah, I agree. You have to good ingredients. And as you know, living in Oregon, we have amazing ingredients here from, you know, all the local ranchers and farmers. And so I think we're super lucky because you do get to start with incredible ingredients, but that's exactly where it starts. If you're buying bad ingredients, you're kind of screwed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about mistakes, major mistakes, maybe a handful of major mistakes that we make when it comes to grilling and barbecue.
Well, I mean, any cookbook author worth the salt can take an hour telling you about all the mistakes we've made.
How much time do you have?
I am constantly experimenting, constantly trying new things. Just 2 nights ago, not barbecue. I was in Italy a few years ago, and we landed, and I met up with the correspondent from the New York Times, and she took us to a little place, and I had pasta carbonara. which is pasta with raw egg yolk, and it sort of cooks, so it's safer. And it was just heavenly. And it just absolutely, and I've been trying to replicate that ever since. And about every 4 or 5 months, I'll convince my wife to let me try again. And I have failed miserably every damn single time,
No.
including 2 nights ago. I just cannot nail it. And I have the good fortune and the misfortune to have married a PhD microbiologist who just retired as one of the top food safety experts from the FDA. And so she will not allow me to serve her raw eggs.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's a very high, not high risk, there's a risk of salmonella,
Right.
and Campylobacter. And raw eggs, they carry this bacteria often, not always, but it's risky. So I have learned how to pasteurize eggs with sous vide. If you put the eggs in a sous vide bath at 131 for 2 hours, you'll come out with a perfect egg that still has transparent whites and tender yolks, but they're pasteurized. So you can now use these ingredients for eggnog and for other
Carbonara.
Food and carbonara. And I just didn't work out.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I'm not done. Although she told me the next time I do it, I'm eating it up by myself.
You know what's funny? I'm with you on that because I love carbonara. I've tried to make it a few times. The last time I made it, it was okay. But I see other chefs make it, and I'm like, why can't I do? Why doesn't mine turn out like that? It doesn't look like that. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, and I just had numerous dishes that keep failing. After we were in Venice on that very same trip, and tasted pickled sardines. I went to a little place in Venice where the tourists don't go, and the waiter and we were able to communicate. And we told him we wanted to eat the local dishes, not the tourist dishes.
Yeah.
And then he said, well, he was skeptical, but he brought out these pickled sardines, and they were just fantastic.
I bet.
Just fantastic. Called Sardine at Saur, Saor. And I have since found recipes for it, triangulated. I know how to do it. I just can't do it. I have failed at it multiple occasions.
Okay, so let's get back to mistakes with grilling and barbecue. I mean, I know I've made several in this area. Actually, well, my husband's the master griller around here. Honestly, the grill intimidates me a little bit. It's scary. It's a scary place.
Shouldn't be.
I know.
I know. It's kind of weird. I'm going to tread very lightly on delicate ground here.
Okay.
But I don't know why for sure. I have some theories. Don't know if I can explain them properly here. I've written about them. But somehow or other, the grill and the TV remote control belong to men. And I don't know why. I have a few. Yeah, you're laughing. It's true, isn't it? We have our Pitmaster Club. Our website's open to anybody.
Right.
I mean, the recipes work regardless of gender.
Right.
But our research shows us that 80% of our audience is male, and almost 90% of our members are male.
And there are some incredible female grillers out there. Incredible.
Oh yeah. There's some of the some of my mentors. Candy Weaver, former president of the Kansas City Barbecue Society, has taught me many tricks. They're out there.
Okay, I'm gonna find them.
Whippen, but I don't know why, but a lot of women feel intimidated by the grill. I think some of the reasons are it's a little dirty sometimes, especially charcoal. And if you've just gotten your nails done, maybe that's not something you desire. The smoke gets in your hair.
Okay, that
I
is
told you I
true.
was treading on delicate land here.
Okay, no, the smoke in the hair, that is a big one for me, especially if I've just
Okay.
washed it and then I leave and I smell like a barbecue pit. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
I got news for you. It's a pheromone, honey. uh, uh, leave
Uh,
it.
she smells like smoked meat. I love it. But for seriously, is another some of the mistakes I would think would be patience, like not
Yeah,
having patience. Okay.
a lot of things require patience, and we were talking about gender. That's an area where women have it over men. I mean, guys are terribly impatient, and there's a well-known phenomenon that occurs with a lot of big cuts of meat. If you're cooking them at a low temp, like 225, brisket and pork butt particularly will go up to a temperature around 150, 170 internal temperature, and then they'll stop.
I
It's called the
know.
stall,
Ugh.
and it's called the stall, and they won't go up in temperature. And meanwhile, the guests are arriving, and you're going to get it up. Your goal is to get up to 200 or so, and it's stuck at 150, and it's not going up, and you're freaking out. You're pulling out your hair.
Mhm.
The reason for this is that the hot air is warming the meat, and as the meat warms, the moisture is evaporating, and the evaporation is cooling the meat. And so you reach a stasis, a point where the heating and the cooling are equal, and it won't stop until the surface of the meat dries out. And so if you baste, you're continuing the process you can't get through.
Mm.
But if you stop basting and you just let it alone, eventually the surface will dry out, and then the meat will continue to heat, and you'll break through and you'll finish the cook. But this stall can last for hours, and it freaks people out. There are
Yeah.
other ways to break through. Another way to break through is to wrap the meat in aluminum foil or butcher paper or something like that, and then you've contained it, and the moisture can't evaporate and it doesn't cool. Um,
Seasonings. Is this another mistake? Either the wrong seasoning, too much, not enough?
People don't understand seasonings and marinades very well, and this is really interesting science, and it's really important to learn. Salt is the magic rock. Salt is two atoms, sodium and chloride. That's all. When they get wet, they get what they call ionizing, and they ionize, and they can penetrate deep into the meat. And one of the cool things that salt does deep in the meat is it enhances the flavor without altering it. It doesn't change the flavor like garlic does or black pepper does. It enhances and amplifies the flavor. It also messes with the proteins. It's called denaturing. And it changes the structure of the protein so the protein can hold on to water better. So salt is magic. Salt is important. And I know a lot of people on salt restricted diets worry about this. You don't need to use a lot of salt.
Right.
Our rule of thumb is a half a teaspoon of Morton's coarse kosher salt per pound of meat. And I mentioned Morton's coarse because all different grades of salt, all different brands of salt are different grain size, and that makes them different salinity. So we standardize on one brand, and they don't pay me. It's just what we've chosen Morton's coarse because
Sure.
it's available everywhere and it's easy to pick up with your fingers and scatter. So salt is important. But sugar, for example, is a minimum of 23 atoms. Depending on what kind of sugar, it can be more. Black pepper, garlic, all the spices in your spice rack, they're too large to get very far into the meat. They go into the cracks, the crevices, the pores, but physically they can't go much more than a 16th of an inch in. And you can prove this to yourself by getting yourself a pork loin or a turkey breast and go to your spice rack and put every damn thing in your spice rack on there or whatever you want, cook it up, and then slice it in half and take a sample from the center, a core sample. It tastes like turkey. You won't taste any of those herbs and spices because they don't go in. They don't go in under any circumstances on this planet or any other one. And so your marinades are a surface treatment. Your rubs and spices are a surface treatment. Only salt gets in.
Interesting. So, do you just use just salt or do you use other seasonings?
Oh, I won't skip the salt,
Right.
because it does enhance flavor, it does amplify flavor, it does hold on to moisture. But and I go at the salt with moderation. But yeah, I mean, we've even introduced some of our own brands of
Woo.
rubs and seasoning, um, and they're really nice blends. And I have recipes on our website; they're free, for pork rubs, beef rub, poultry rub, fish rub,
Right.
and so on. Um, and absolutely, but they season the surface. Now, if you're eating a flank steak, for example, which is maybe an inch thick, the surface is a large part of the bite.
Exactly.
You know, if you're taking a slice of a turkey breast on Thanksgiving, the surface is a very small part of the bite,
Right.
which is why a lot of us rely on gravy for flavor,
Yeah.
because the gravy has flavor and that you can get all over the interior.
Let's talk turkey. That was a really nice segue, by the way. There's a little
Taco turkey.
there's a little holiday coming up. Coming up quickly, actually. I can't believe October feels like it's almost over. Um,
Oh, dear, dear, dear.
I know. We have a little holiday coming up
Hmm.
where a lot of us will cook a turkey and a lot of us will either do it perfectly or we're going to screw it up.
Yeah, I have a lot of advice on turkey.
Ooh, okay.
I have written extensively on the subject. I've even done an ebook, which is on Amazon for $3.99, on everything you need to know about turkey, from buying it to leftovers.
Okay.
But I have a lot of it on our website for free. And there are several tricks, because turkey is problematic. I mean, it's very large, it's very thick meat. It is not a very flavorful meat. It's easy to overcook, and especially if you've not done it before, following a few guidelines will get you there. Most important thing is, don't cook your first turkey on Thanksgiving Day. If you've
Please.
never cooked a turkey before, cook one next week.
Okay.
Cook one tomorrow.
That is a really
Cook
good tip.
one in advance. Experiment. Go to my website, go to amazingribs.com. The recipe I give is for cooking the turkey on the grill, but a grill is just an oven outdoors with a lousy thermostat. It's very similar to cooking indoors, and a lot of the techniques and the concepts, the science, apply to cooking indoors as well. But I would recommend you consider cooking your turkey on the grill, or if you have one, a smoker. Number one, it leaves room for pie in the oven. That's most important. Number two, turkey and smoke go together really well.
Mm.
And you can get a lovely, delicate smoke flavor in a turkey on a regular old grill. You don't need a fancy dancy Texas pit. So experiment, practice. Number two, don't go crazy and try to inject it with. I've heard people injecting turkey with Dr. Pepper, crazy stuff like that. Let the turkey's flavor shine. You're going to put a good rub on the surface, a good seasoning, and I'm going to teach you how to make a good gravy. But don't try to inject it with a bunch of crazy stuff. Although I do have a technique for injecting with butter, which is butterballing. That's how it began.
Yeah.
But it's not necessary. Don't stuff the turkey.
Yeah.
Now, you got to think about this from the science standpoint. In your oven, the hot air cooks the outside of the bird, but air does not penetrate the meat. The meat is muscle, and it's about 75% water, and air cannot penetrate it. Nothing much penetrates it except salt. It's fully saturated, and water is a great insulator. That's why it takes so long to cook a turkey. The hot air cooks the outside of the turkey, but as the outside begins to warm, it begins to build up energy. It becomes like a battery or a capacitor, and it passes that energy down towards the center. So the hot air cooks the outside of the bird, but the outside of the bird is what cooks the inside of the bird. So the thicker the bird is, the longer it takes to cook. And this is a core principle in almost all cooking. It's the thickness of the meat that determines how long it takes to cook, along with the temperature of the air. And whether you're using infrared or indirect, those are the three variables. But think about the thickness. A 1-inch thick steak cooks a lot faster than an 1.5 or a 2-inch thick steak. Anytime you read a recipe that says put the steak in a cast iron pan and cook it for 3 minutes on one side, flip it over, cook for 2 minutes on the other side, run, don't walk. And, any recipe that doesn't give you temperatures.
Thank you.
This is 2022. Digital thermometers are inexpensive and essential. Nothing will make you a better cook faster than having good digital thermometer. And you can get a great digital thermometer for $30 or less that will give you a precision reading within 5 seconds. That there is nothing more valuable than that, especially when it comes to turkey, because you're going to cook turkey to a temperature past well done, because turkey and chicken, because of the way they're handled and slaughtered, are often contaminated with pathogenic bacteria. And that's sad, but it's true. The government needs to fix that problem. But until they do, you've got to cook turkey to a minimum of 160 degrees.
Right.
USDA says 165. I think 160 is perfectly safe, and there's evidence to back me up. And it makes a difference. And if you go past 160, you're going to be eating cardboard. And you need a digital thermometer to get you there. That pop-up thermometer is not reliable.
Garbage.
Pop-up thermometer is often set for 170 or 180, which is cardboard.
Yeah.
So the first thing you do is you pull that pop-up out and throw it in the trash and get your digital thermometer. And if you don't have one, go out and get one. On AmazingRibs.com, we have an electrical engineer who tests thermometers, rates them, and reviews them. We don't sell a single one of them.
Nice. But
we link you to where to get them. We have over 200 of them tested and rated.
Wow.
So you can check, if you see one in the store, you can see what our rating we gave it. And get yourself one. You can get a really nice one for as little as $20.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll give you an instant reading in 5 minutes, 5 seconds.
Yeah, they're critical.
Yeah. If you've got one of those little round dial thermometers that they take 30 seconds or more, and they're not accurate. It's an old technology. It was invented in the 1800s. Take it out, put it in your driveway, and back your car over it. Okay, so that's back to the stuffing.
Yes.
If you stuff the bird, you have made it a lot thicker. You've turned it into a bowling ball. And it's hard to get that temperature to go from the outside all the way down to the center of that bowling ball, which has turkey juice in it and needs to be cooked. And it takes forever. And by the time you have that center safe, the outer layers are overcooked and dry.
Right.
So leave the center cavity open. Warm air will go into the cavity and will cook from the inside out. It'll cook faster. You'll have less moisture loss, and it'll be less dry. And in fact, a better method still is a technique called spatchcocking, which is a slightly naughty sounding word for butterflying the bird. You get a good tough pair of poultry shears, and you find the backbone, and you snip along both sides of the backbone and remove the backbone, and then spread the bird out. And now you can brown both sides of the bird, the skin side and the cavity side, because if you just do it Norman Rockwell style and leave the bird whole and leave the cavity open, you're going to have a tan interior. And brown is beautiful. Brown is flavor. When food's brown, it's because they've undergone a chemical reaction called the Maillard reaction.
Yes.
And the Maillard reaction is when molecules grow up, they get new flavors, they get wonderful. That's you see it on the crust of bread, you see it when you toast bread, coffee beans, chocolate beans are all subjected to the Maillard reaction, and that's why we all love the crust of a roast, the brown skin of the turkey.
Yep.
So if you spread it out butterflied, A, you're browning the inside, so you're getting more flavor. B, it's now thinner, it's going to cook faster, less moisture loss. The problem is it doesn't look quite like the way Granny wants it to look.
Right.
She wants it to look like the Norman Rockwell bird.
Right.
You can kind of reconstruct that shape on the platter, but if you can get the gang to get over it and learn to love a butterfly turkey, it's going to be better. It's going to be faster, and use that digital thermometer. One more important tip I want to share is if you have one of those beautiful Calphalon roasting pans, with 4-inch sides and a V-shaped rack, throw the V-shaped rack away.
Okay.
When you put the bird deep into the pan, the sides of the pan block the energy, the heat. That's why the bottom of your bird is tan and soggy while the top of the bird is golden.
Okay.
You lift it up and put it on a rack above the pan so that the air can circulate all around the bird. And now it's going to cook the bottom. You're going to get beautiful brown, beautiful golden skin on the bottom. And there's a couple of little chunks of meat down under there. If you haven't discovered them, we call them the oysters.
Yes.
And they're really good. And you can get those oysters cooked properly. You can brown it all around, get it above the pan. And now we're going to get to the really cool part. You make your gravy in that pan. What you do is when you start to cook this baby, you take the leaves off some celery,
mm-hmm.
maybe even some celery stalks, some carrots, skin them and chop them up, some herbs, parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
Nice.
Throw them in the pan. You can add water or some white wine, even a little beer. Don't go too much because beer can be bitter. Get that pan filled about an inch full of liquid, and some onions, maybe even some apples. I've got a recipe for this, but basically you're going to let the bird drip into this pan and you're going to build a stock. This is a turkey stock, and you're making essentially turkey soup under the bird. But it's a very thin broth, and it's loaded with flavor. And if you do this on the grill, it's going to pick up smoke flavor too. And then just before the bird is done, before 160, around 150, you take that pan out, strain it, taste it. If you need to, you can put it in a pot and reduce it if you want it more concentrated. Adjust the salt, and you don't have to add flour and make a roux and make it thick. If you make it thick, it just sits on top of the meat. But if you leave it thin, like a broth like this, it's loaded with flavor and it can penetrate the meat.
Huh.
And so if you've got breast meat, which can be on the dry side, this stuff will get in there and amplify the flavor and take it to the next level. It's really fantastic.
Boom.
So those are my best tips. And I've got all this on AmazingRibs.com, or if you want, you go to Amazon and buy that $3.99 ebook.
So quick question to clarify. You said the V-rack, toss that baby. We don't want that. You want like a rack that sits kind of above the pan. Okay.
Yeah, you can use, your cookie your cookie cooling rack.
Yep.
Or even if you're doing it indoors, your oven has three racks. You can actually put the bird on one of those racks. Now you'll have to clean it when you're done because it'll have turkey drip. But you can clean it, a little steel wool, and it'll come clean. And so you put the turkey on a rack that's maybe, you got to have enough clearance above it. So you put it down maybe a foot or so below the top. And then you put another rack underneath and your pan goes in there. Okay. And it's a drip pan. Yes. It's catching the drippings.
Okay.
It's designed to catch the drippings. And now your bird's going to get brown all over. On a grill, you just lift the grates and you put the pan underneath the grates. And I got pictures of how to do this on various types of grills and stuff on the website.
Okay, thank goodness. Thank goodness for AmazingRibs.com. I would be so lost right now. And I am so excited to cook turkey this year. And I'm also picturing people spatchcocking turkeys this year and then like putting them back together.
It's a little crazy because by the time it's cooked, it's stiffer.
Yeah. And
so it's not easy to reconstitute it to look like a Norman Rockwell bird. I'll tell you, I go even one step further. I hesitate to recommend it because people will be in rebellion. I break it down into 8 pieces. I cut the thighs off. I cut the breasts in half, and I take the wings off because the wings cook really fast.
Yes.
And the thighs like to go up to 170 to 180. They're really best at that temperature. And the breasts I like to get off of there at 155 to 160. So if I break it down, I can start the breasts and the thighs and keep the wings aside and throw them on it, 20, 30 minutes later in order to get them done in synchrony. But I can now use my instant read thermometer and test every piece and get it to optimum temperature.
But that's a method, I think, because you really want to enjoy the entire bird. For most of us, I think I don't say most, for a lot of people, we don't care. We just want the Norman Rockwell turkey. But
it's the same one.
You bring up a good point. If you really want the bird to be delicious, you're going to cut it anyways, honestly.
Yeah, that's what you're gonna do. And if you break it down before you cut it, then the carving goes a lot faster, and you can get hot food out.
All right, Meathead.
I mean, instead of standing there in the kitchen for a half hour cutting down the bird, it's cold by the time you serve it.
It's so true. Sold. Meathead, you've just changed my life. You've changed my life.
And you don't have to let it rest. This is another unproven theory. Resting meats, there's very little extra loss of juices. Every chef on the world will tell you, let it rest. There's no evidence that resting does any good. People want hot food. Serve them hot food.
Okay.
And for God's sake, don't tent it with aluminum foil because you just cooked it and now you got crispy skin. You tent it with aluminum foil and now you got soggy skin.
My husband's going to applaud you because I'm like, let's just tent it to keep it warm. And he's like, why? We don't need to tent it. Don't tent it. Mm-hmm. We have arguments about tenting with aluminum foil. Okay.
I'm on his side.
Okay. All right. No. Hey, I'm not such a diva in the kitchen that I make mistakes all the time. So I feel that.
Hey, me too. I bet I make more than you do.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. No, not mistakes. You make more food than I do, probably.
Well, no, I make more mistakes because I'm always screwing around.
But I will say, when you make a mistake, for the most part, you don't make it again. That same mistake, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's not only a rule in the kitchen for me, but it's a rule in my business. I tell all my staff, don't be afraid to make mistakes, stick your neck out, try new stuff, but don't you dare make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
It's a good rule for business as well as for cooking.
Yes.
But we keep a big stack of carryout menus nearby in the kitchen because there have been many nights when it's like, I can't eat this.
Oh, that's so funny. Quick little story about making a mistake. Very early in my career as a TV journalist, travel an hour away from the station to cover a wildfire, because we have them here in Oregon. I get to the base camp and realized I didn't have a tripod. Forgot my tripod. Had to drive an hour back to the station to get my tripod. Drive an hour back to fire camp because I have to have a tripod. If as a TV reporter, you have to have a tripod. You can figure some things out, but on a wildfire, you have to have a tripod. I never made that mistake again. So yes, making mistakes is good sometimes.
Keep a spare in the trunk of the car. I do a lot of photography, and I've got clamps that will let me clamp onto a tree branch or anything.
Oh, okay. Well, these were like cameras about this big.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I'm working with SLRs.
Right. Okay. We're gonna wrap up a little bit. Favorite meat to either grill or barbecue?
Tough choice. I love a great steak. Who doesn't? Ribeye or a strip, 1.5 inches thick minimum. I do a technique called reverse sear, which I describe on the website.
Okay.
You start it on the indirect side, away from the coals, warm it gently with convection airflow so it's even color and even temperature, edge to edge. Get it cooked to around 120, 125. Lift the lid, move it over direct infrared energy where you're pounding it with energy, and flip it. I know that goes against everything you've read, but everything you've read is wrong. If you flip it frequently, you prevent the energy from penetrating very deep, You'll get a beautiful dark crust, and the interior will be edge to edge, even temperature, even color. 130 to 135 is your target. At those temperatures, we know because we can test it with instruments, the meat is most tender and most juicy. And I all my life, I have sneered at anybody that used anything but salt and pepper on a steak until recently when I created a rub just for the fun of it that is absolutely awesome on steaks. And forgive me, it sounds like a commercial,
No,
but
please.
it's Meathead's red meat rub.
Okay.
And
Is that
it's just,
available on the website?
yeah. We don't actually sell it ourselves. We'll send you to a website that does. Amazon has it.
Okay.
All my rubs are and sauce are on Amazon. My wife won't let me cook a steak without it. That said, I am AmazingRibs.com, and I do love my ribs. And there's several great tricks to that. We have a recipe called last meal ribs because if you're on death row, that's what you want for your last meal.
I like it. Nice. And then favorite gadgets, if any. I know digital thermometer.
Well, yeah, I hesitate to call it a gadget
Right.
because it's essential.
Right.
I mean, it's like knives. You've got to have one. I mean, it's right up there with essential with knives. Um, I really like these chamois type leather gloves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're welding gloves. They make them for barbecue, and they're leather. And I mean, in a pinch, I can reach in and grab a hot log and move it, or coals with my gloved hand.
Yeah.
Or if the grates need to be shuffled around, I can grab the heavy duty grates and move them around. They're impervious to heat. They get slimy and dirty, and they can be washed.
Hmm.
And we test a lot of products.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually have a guy who's on our staff full time, does nothing but test grills and smokers, and he has reviews of hundreds of grills and smokers. Again, we don't sell a one; we just link you to the way to the sources to buy them, and they're detailed reviews with video and everything. And we have gloves that we've tested and recommended, a whole bunch of them.
Awesome. Well, if you want people to be better at grilling and barbecuing, then of course you would test grills and smokers and thermometers and try different seasonings. I mean, if that's the goal, then obviously that's what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You have been so much fun. I don't want this conversation to end, but we are going to wrap up and get to the final three. Best advice
Uh-oh.
best advice you've ever been given.
Was from my dad. He and I followed it. He said, "Figure out what you love to do and do it. Make a
Oh,
living at it. Figure out what you love to do and make a living at it." And that's what I've done all my life. I loved to drink, so I was a wine critic, and I love to cook and eat, and so I'm a cookbook author and a website owner. Um, and I think it's great advice for everybody. And I'll offer a bit of advice that nobody ever offered me, but I think I figured it out. Um, uh, I like to watch Shark Tank, and you see these people. They hear from these sharks, and they tell them, "Nope, it's not going to fly." And then they go off camera, and the camera points at them and says, "They just don't get it. I'm going to keep doing it, even if it destroys me and my marriage, and I have to sell my house, and I have to knock off a bank. I'm going to keep doing it." There's, we as a small business owner, and I've been a small business owner all my adult life, we lionize the entrepreneur, and we think they are the backbone of American economy. Um, be careful about quitting your job and your 9 to 5 and your weekly paycheck and your health care and going into business on your own. Be thoughtful. It's a huge risk, and we know that many businesses fail. And I have struggled, and I have failed. I had a magazine that failed. So that's my advice.
That's good advice. Yes, I recently, as you know, left the world of TV
Mm-hmm.
news a year ago, and that was scary.
Mm-hmm.
Consistent paycheck, consistent,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things, and it is really scary. But it was something that I gave thought to for like 3 years, 3 to 5 years, thinking about
Mm-hmm.
what was going to be my next step. So that is very, very good advice. And just to
Mm-hmm.
quit that consistency is a little
Mm-hmm.
silly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good stuff. What's your happy place?
My wife and I love theater and travel. And we are avid theater goers. I'm in the Chicago area. There is no shortage of great theater here. I'd say we end up going to a play or the opera or something every 2 weeks.
Love it.
It's expensive, but it's mind out of body. It forces thoughtfulness. Just last weekend, we went and saw a play called Clyde's. If it comes to a theater near you, you got to go. It happens to be culinary. It's about a truck stop, and everybody who works there is an ex-con,
Mm.
and it's about mistakes and forgiveness and sandwiches, and a lot of wisdom about sandwiches in there, and it's funny and profound. Clyde's.
I love a good Sammy and support the arts. That's incredibly
Mhm.
important. In all things food and drink, what do you crave? What always sounds good?
You know, I'm not real fussy. If I come to your house and you're serving Mogan David, I'm going to drink it and enjoy it. Um, uh, I'm not real crazy about going to a cookout or a barbecue and eating unsafe chicken and burgers,
Hmm.
and I see that a lot. But um, Cheetos, Cheetos, that's my craving. Oh my God,
Yeah.
put a bag of Cheetos in front of me, they'll disappear instantly. Oh, I love Cheetos.
You are not alone there, most of America, because Cheetos, I believe, talk about the science. They have all of these ingredients that hit
Yeah,
all of the
yeah,
senses.
sweet. So, and I just read that somebody somewhere, I think in Iowa, erected a statue. It's like three fingers holding up a Cheeto, and it's out there in like in a cornfield somewhere, and it's just and the fingers are yellow.
Of course. Cheeto dust. Of course. Absolutely. Um, Meathead Goldwyn, you have been so much fun. You've given us so much information. You've changed my mind literally on so many different things as far as coming grilling and cooking turkey for this Thanksgiving. All of the tips and the tricks and the recipes can be found at amazingribs.com,
Mm-hmm.
which is your website,
Mm-hmm.
which has been running for years now. Years.
Yeah, 2005.
Incredible. So, amazingribs.com is where you can find all of this information. Also, if you want to pick up his book, Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, and you're working on another book coming out.
Yes, I am.
Exciting. Okay. Well, we will be
Yeah.
looking forward to
Well,
that.
no, it's not exciting. It's torture. I threw a wet blanket over entrepreneurship. Anybody who wants to write a book, give that a lot of thought because it is. I mean, I said I love travel.
Yeah.
My wife and I love to travel. We haven't traveled much at all since COVID, and now I can't get away. I am stuck at my keyboard until I turn in this manuscript in June. So.
Okay. Well, I'll let you get back to work then.
Hey, this is fun.
Thanks.
You ask good questions. It's always nice to talk to somebody who loves food. I get interviewed often, and not always do I find a foodie on the other end of the microphone. So this is great fun.
I'm honored. Thank you so much. I am so incredibly excited that you spent the last, I don't know, hour and almost a half with me talking about food.
Oh.
We can geek out over food anytime
Yeah.
you want.
Well, if you want to talk again, just you know where to find me.
I do know where to find you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. You've been listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma with me, Trish Close. You can watch this podcast and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Just search Hungry for More, An Epicurean's Dilemma. You can also listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.